We had to take communication to a Web 2.0 environment. We had to take it online.
I think the tools are incredible.
You get better loyalty. You get less office politics.
Taking an idea and really stretching it across the entire organization and network out, meet individuals that are passionate around the same thing to accomplish something that you'd never be able to accomplish on your own.
Most companies traditionally communicate at employees. They send a message to employees and the message gets received, you hope, and now we're done. But that's not how the world works anymore.
Employees will start groups on Facebook or MSN or MySpace or wherever. They're already socializing. Why not give them a venue where you can be part of the conversation?
A group of us set out to say, well, let's make a difference and let's change this.
Blue Shirt Nation is a social networking website, something very similar to MySpace.
Blue Shirt Nation has been pretty much like a lab for us. It's allowed us to try a lot of different things, fail really fast, and then try things again.
It gives me an opportunity to really connect with more of my coworkers, not just here at the store, but throughout the entire company.
The water cooler is the online discussion forum that allows employees to talk about whatever's on their mind.
It's the only method where I can actually talk to my team from the comfort of my own home.
It's the fastest way to distribute information across the entire store.
The use of Wiki makes our employees feel like they're empowered and that they can contribute to everything within the company.
If the stores are learning something from the customers or any experiences, any events that they're having, they can add in the Wiki page.
I have created the actual home theater page. It supplies the retail field information on home theater. We also have contact lists on there if they have any questions.
One of my employees had a great idea, and he came to me and said, what do I do with this idea?
The idea itself was the Geek Squad gaming services.
I told him to go ahead and post on the Loop Marketplace. The Loop Marketplace is where people can go to post innovation ideas that they want some feedback on.
4 hours later, my idea was up and people are commenting on it. I was funded. Now it's going company-wide. It's a pretty fun process, actually.
With so many stores spread so far and wide apart, how do you actually get people's voices into our most important decisions?
How can companies use the power of the free market to help drive their decision-making?
Tools like the prediction market tool help us do that.
It's a web-enabled stock market game. Stocks represent future events or future outcomes, and people trade in the market based on what they think will happen in the future.
If I'm leading a project and the stock is, will this thing launch on time? And then all of a sudden it went down 20%. I instantly know that something has happened.
That gives me a chance to be able to have a voice to leadership when they're seeing these stocks, when they're seeing the movement and the changes going, and know that the stuff that I know is valuable enough that people want to hear it.
We talk about our core philosophies at Best Buy. It allows us to bring our unique experiences and ideas to the table. You know, it's not easy to call up Brad Anderson and say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking.
You get better loyalty, you get less office politics, and you create the conditions whereby this marketplace of ideas can come to fruition.
We're talking more as a company at all levels, which is great. I think we have to turn that transparency outward towards the customer and allow them to participate in the conversations as well.
Imagine a Wikipedia not only populated by the masses looking for knowledge, but also by a bunch of tech masters from Geek Squad who are also using the same space for their own use. Now you've got the quality of the crowd and some Zen masters in the mix.
We're moving from a role of being the ones who own the messages and deliver those to employees to a role that we are just facilitators. We're encouraging, we're enabling.
We're getting ahead of the curve so that when those next generations of folks come work for us, we're set up. We already have everything ready to go for them.
It allows us to use those insights, that input, and that feedback to do better at serving our customers.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vice Chairman and CEO Best Buy, Brad Anderson, and Chairman, The Conversation Group, Peter Hirschberg.
Peter, good to see you. Hello, Brad. So, you know, when we think of Best Buy, this is an organization pushing 3,000 stores and $50 billion in revenue, and it's in the distribution business. And
And that's not the first place I would think about as a company, as a wiki, and pulling knowledge in from the edge. So talk to me a little bit about the transformation and how such a traditional business is adopting some of these new tools, and culturally, what this power shift means.
Well, we weren't actually built to do this. So it's been, it's a little like taking a big engine and completely flipping it. But the great thing that we've had as an organization is we've had to sell technology, which is always in flux and transition, and there's nothing stable in the businesses that we sell. So it made it a little easier to do this. And essentially what we saw as the primary insight was that our customer, who we built to basically distribute goods and services to, were now going to be much more interested in how they were going to use the product and what the application of the product. And instead of that being sort of most easily served by one single efficient methodology, that's now literally millions of different choices that people are making in terms of, so we're going to have to go from a product distribution company to a service company, and we're going to have to go to a solution company, and it would be a very wide array of solutions. So this seemed like the only possible way to do it, and the most exciting way to do it.
As I've watched your company over the last year, I've seen you roll out experiments like the ones that we've just seen, where it almost looks like employees are trying things, and you say that works, and then you're learning from that. So culturally, here you have employees taking the lead, folks on the line, kids, and then you have traditional middle management doing things the way they should be doing things. What's it like at that wavefront when you have traditional management coming up against power shift and wiki-esque things?
Well, this is something that I really think there hasn't been anything close to enough dialogue about. This is murder on middle management. Or actually, it's the more senior the management is, the worse it is. Because a lot of folks, a lot of us who assume the role of leaders, because we like to be on stage. And we like to assume the limelight, and we like to make the decisions. And this absolutely flips the role of a leader. Because actually, if I've got an idea, it's less effective than if somebody in the field has an idea, because it has an authenticity coming out of the field that it doesn't have coming from me, and it can develop a community before it actually gets actionable. So fundamentally, as a leader, what I've got to be interested in is not so much divining the right strategy, but I have to have the curiosity to do the right kind of listening. And I have to know how to take whatever resources I can do as a leader to marshal it behind initiatives that come from somewhere else in the organization instead of from the top. And that's really been tough for us at the senior levels.
I think one of the reasons that this innovation is happening at Best Buy first is there's almost a perfect storm going on. You're dealing in geeky technical things where you need an awful lot of the collective knowledge of line employees and customers. But your employee base is really interesting. When Jennifer spoke earlier, she talked about the fact that 50% of the world is under 25 years old, and that's pretty much the Best Buy employee base. So talk to me a little bit about the people who are at the core of this kind of
Yeah, we had this enormous natural asset. I sort of look essentially at organizations as they're sort of energy pools. And we've got 170,000 people with the potential insight of 170,000 people. And I know after 35 years and starting in the stores, you're exactly as motivated to deliver service as you feel like you're engaged in the work. So the level of energy for the whole enterprise rises dramatically if I can feel like I'm actually engaged in not just doing a job somebody else told me to do, but I'm actually creating the job that I'm doing. And with the technology we're talking about today, you literally can do that. Plus that, our customers use the devices in so many different ways. If we're going to mirror it, we have to have a huge range of capacity and be able to add value in the process. So the potential, the economic potential for us as an organization to be able to sort of mirror those 22-year-old, our average age is about 22 in terms of our employee base, to mirror them and their insight is just enormous. And that's the adventure to see if we can get these two lined up.
That video went by quickly. I want to go through a couple of the case studies there. There was something called the looped marketplace. Now, this essentially replaces the suggestion box. And what does everybody think of the employee suggestion box? And in this case, you're actually using almost like a financial market where if an employee has an idea, they can make a suggestion. And then if somebody in corporate wants to fund it, it makes a market. And the employee doesn't, it's not just thanks for the suggestion. It's like, oh, here's some money, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, and there's even a bigger advantage before that, which is if I hear the loop and somebody in corporate doesn't think it's worth anything, but I'm in another store somewhere and I think that actually solves my problem, I can go try that somewhere else. And so if it doesn't land with the person in corporate initially, I could have a small army starting to do it before that actually overwhelms the decision that winds up being made in the corporation, because I've now got evidence that it actually works.
And there's another financial market type thing, which is tag trade, which is where you almost assign phantom stock to programs like how many of these DVDs will we sell or how will the Christmas promotion be, and you track what employees think of the stock going up and down.
This was the first thing we had that really got exciting because we do Christmas forecasts every year, and as you can imagine, executives, senior level executives, if you tell me that our results are going to be very good, I'm enthusiastic about hearing that kind of input. So there's a weighting to the dialogue that's always there towards being overly optimistic in terms of expectations of future. And I've also got necessarily penalty if I've got something going on wrong. I may want to kind of cover that up. And by creating the marketplace where essentially anybody could vote, you started to see patterns that almost become, actually the first Christmas we used it, it was dead on in terms of figuring out what our sales were going to be on a daily basis, a month in advance. And the reason it was dead on is that we had the insight that was in the system that wasn't captured through the hierarchy. So it's really transformed the way, it's incredibly helpful in terms of running the business because you get a chance to see the insight inside the business that's otherwise covered up by a normal hierarchy.
You know, when people read information displays, they tend to be schooled in it. Traders know how to read Bloomberg terminals. All of a sudden, you have real-time information coming in from employees about what they think, going to merchants who haven't had this before. Was it information overload? Was it thank you? Was it what do I do with this?
Yeah, if I'm sitting there and I'm trying to achieve a given number, and the evidence is that I'm not going to be able to achieve it, I've now given the person that's seeing that evidence a chance to be heard. And they're heard because they're blind and they're a part of an overall market. So there's no accountability for them for raising their voice.
One of the other interesting things is Blue Shirt Nation, which is an internal social network. And the story of how this came about I found interesting. Gary Noling and Steve Bent, who were in advertising, wanted to understand from frontline employees what are the issues in selling an HDTV. So they actually decided to build a network so the employees could say what the issues were so they could do better ads. And when they deployed the network, the first thing the employees said was, thanks for the social network, there's many things we can use this for, and you'll have to earn our confidence for us to answer your questions because there's better things we need to do with it.
Yeah.
What was it like culturally when you connected everybody and they kind of took control of the engine and said thank you?
Well, it was it's been a journey because one of our vice presidents got up and shortly after Blue Shirt Nation was formed and expressed his concerns that it wasn't working because he tried to express what he wanted to do on Blue Shirt Nation and literally had nobody in the enterprise respond.
Right.
And the guys who started Blue Shirt said, you did get an answer. You got a very profound answer to what you're recommending. So it's been a great process of really starting to feel like we're more connected with this large enterprise of people that have this, have an insight that those of us certainly at the center of the enterprise can't get very easily.
Here's one of the examples that struck me. Whenever anyone goes in a Best Buy store, we see terminals that your employees use to get information and pull things up, which is called the Employee Toolkit. And evidently, like so many users of IT systems, they were dissatisfied and wanted a better one. And ultimately, you ended up having the employees build the better system themselves than go to the consultant. Here's a clip of Scott Kirsten, who was running the project, as he realized that they could toss the building of an IT system out to field employees who normally sell DVD players rather than to the big consulting company that normally does these things. Let's take a look at this.
We actually got a request for an estimate on how much this was going to cost. And the thing was going to end up costing us $6.5 million. And the company that was going to build it for us said that we could probably have a proof of concept out to a test district, which is about 10 stores, in about 8 months to a year. And we got 6 employees up to the corporate office, paid for their travel, paid for their hotel, ended up spending about $250,000, and 6 weeks later, we had a proof of concept out to that test district.
Okay, so by day they sell TVs and DVD players. By night they rewrote the IT system.
Yeah, we had an exercise a couple of years ago when we first started to put the underpinnings underneath this, where one of our leaders had an audience about actually this size of Best Buy employees, and with what our current theme is, which is I am Best Buy, which applies to everybody in the organization. And at random, he just started picking people out of the audience and asked them to tell a little bit about their story. And you realize, by the time you got to 7 or 8 people, you realize that inside this room was this enormous variety of experience and expertise inside the organization. And the passion to get the thing done it was always closest to the person who cared most about the particular work. So by the time you hand it to a third party and say, I really care about this, it gets less efficient. So if they've actually got the technical skills, and that's what we're finding oftentimes is the case, man, if you can keep it close enough to the people who care about the outcome, both the cost goes way down and the speed to get to it gets very fast.
This says a lot about the difference between young people who are connected, how they look at management and others. These people came in, dispensed with a lot of planning, dispensed with a lot of design. They kind of knew what they wanted, and they just kept working until they got it right.
Yeah, no, there's a real consequence on the other side, which is that you won't have a scalable product. So, but by the time you know that there's a customer for it, the risk has gone out of building the scalable product. And the speed to get to market in particular, combined with knowing that, has been an enormous benefit. Really is opening up options for it.
The kind of benefits you see in letting employees kind of participate and create doesn't just show up in geeky things. There was another case where, with an workforce average age of 22, getting people to sign up for the 401k plan is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I gather that that was thrown out to the social network as well. So here's a clip of Gary Noling and Steve Bent, advertising guys who built a social network, dealing with the fact that HR says, could the employees please fix the fact that they're not signing up for the 401k program? Let's take a look.
The team approached us and said, we want to have a video contest on Blue Shirt Nation around the 401k. We want to increase enrollment. And Gary and I looked at each other and said, we'll help you. We'll be happy to help you, but good luck with that. Enrollment percentage of our employees in the 401k was around 18% to start with. After the contest, it went up to about 47%. So that's about, what, 40,000 employees that signed up for a 401k that hadn't before. Because, I would argue, the employees got to talk about the 401k in their voice, in their way, in their terms, and it connected with others.
Yeah, and I should tell you the story. We played the video that the employees produced that led to this huge improvement in terms of signups to our board of directors, and believe me, that did not work. It was, the two audiences did not have the same values. Anyway, I'm sorry.
In fact, let's show a clip of that video to this audience right now.
You might agree with the board.
The winning video.
The trick to the 401k plan is you got to start saving early so you can have more money for the future. And the time to start is now. See, this is how it works. Best Buy matches the first 3% contribution that you make out of your paycheck. Then they match 50 cents on the dollar for every 2% afterwards. Don't you get it? Don't you get it? What is this? What are these numbers? Oh, God, you slapped me in the face!
We should have played it for this audience instead of the board.
What's staggering is the results. So participation went from like 17% to 46%.
Yeah, and you see this, we're seeing this tangibly in the results of the enterprise. We just finished a quarter that wasn't such a hot quarter from an earnings standpoint, in part because we're spending a lot of money. We're spending money on these kinds of initiatives, which we think is a really good leading indicator. But the sales number was terrific, and we also had a number we disclosed, which is, for the first time in the history of the company, our turnover rate of employees in the whole system is below 50%, and it was 130%. Just 2.5 years ago.
The reason large industrial organizations were built were to do things like deal with nearly 3,000 stores and lots of products. Meanwhile, you're handing a lot of control over to someone else while asking managers to kind of be cool with it and manage that. So how do you manage that?
I thought the last discussion just before was fascinating because the core thing that has to be there are boundaries. So we have to get a return on the investment on the initiatives that come out of the folks in the field. We've got to have, our brand has to mean something to the customer, so it has to sustain some characteristics. And the lens we've got right now is that essentially what we've got, in order for this to work, the values at Best Buy have to become so deeply entrenched that they are effective boundaries that keep behavior consistent enough so that you actually can count on better fundamental behavior from an employee base than you'd have if you weren't engaged in these activities.
So like what kind of boundaries? What are the things you have to render explicit so people can run around and create?
We have 4 values that were created long before we started doing this, but it happened to thankfully really fit. The first one is unquestioned integrity, starting with humility. So it starts with the presumption that you got to be interested in what the other guy's doing, not just what you're doing. And I got to be able to trust you, because if you're not a person of your word, I can't build on that foundation, especially deep in the organization. The second is learn from challenge and change, that the enterprise is going to be constantly in flux, constantly in transition. Instead of a good thing, that's a bad thing, that's a good thing. And you need to create environments as a leader in which that's apparent. The third is unleashing the power of our people. You know, it's our competitive advantage is using more of the talents of the people that work for the organization than somebody else can. And the last one is having fun while winning, having fun while being the best. And so those 4 values have to really be lived in each environment for this to work.
When you mentioned that to me, it struck me that that stuff used to be so much HR stuff when you had a job to do. But when you're kind of inventing things, dealing with the public, and sourcing what's going on all the time, it's almost like you need the Constitution or the underlying precepts, because you're letting your people invent stuff all the time, and they just can't. It's no longer just
well,
a
and if leadership strays from this, you can get all the dangers, some of which were referred to in the last presentation.
Let's move in our remaining time. We've talked a lot about internal things to how this will change how you design customer experiences, and you know, increasingly young folks live with mobile technology, and when we think of Best Buy, we think of the store, and we think of an online thing. How is mobile going to come in? And I think to kick this part of the conversation off, we should throw it over to Ben Hedrington, who works in IT development. And basically, I was talking to him one day, and he kind of stated his take on the company's mobile vision. So let's start with that and see where it goes. Let's take a look at Ben.
Best Buy says is, we need our customers to know all we know, and that's one of our goals, and that's something we do very well today, and I think a critical piece of that could be mobile. What I've learned from talking to some blue shirts in stores is they would love to have more information, right? They look at the little cards on the products, and there's 3 specs on it. What does that even mean? Customers are asking them questions they can't answer. Wouldn't it be great if they could pull out that mobile device and see everything that we know, in quotes? So, really putting some tools in our blue shirts' hand to close sales, to be smarter, and to learn quicker, I think would be seen as a huge win. Customer reviews and ratings are currently available on the beta version of the mobile site I have out today. And I really envision a customer, maybe not today, maybe today, who knows, walking up to a camera and saying, I need to know what the crowds, have said about this. And it's still the Best Buy reviews from our bestbuy.com site, but that's much more information than you will get by just talking to the people you're standing next to, right? So, read 60 reviews about that iPod Touch while you're standing right next to it. They might walk out and go to CNET to find that same information. If I can provide that to them while they're in that experience, I think that's a net positive for the company as a whole as well.
So I haven't historically thought of Best Buy in the user experience business, but what Ben's basically talking about is we should be able to provide the same experience you get when you're looking up stuff or support information anytime with you all the time.
Yeah, we have an overall sense that the user experience in the consumer electronics space is pretty terrible on average. And we've got a tremendous, any country we've touched, we can go in and shoot man-on-the-street interviews and have people talk about the frustrations of dealing with the products we sell. Our dream is that we solve that puzzle. And so what we've got to have is basically a combination of folks with a particular vision of how to begin to solve the elements of solving the puzzle. And then we've got to sort of swim far enough ahead in the horizon that we make it possible for those attributes to be there as these visions develop.
The theme of Clay Shirky's book, Here Comes Everywhere, is the power of all this wisdom that's out there. And how are you harnessing the fact that it seems like one of the greatest assets you have is the collective knowledge of your blue shirts and then all of these Geek Squad folks, and then the wisdom of all of your customers? It's like if you put all that together, there's a lot of experience there.
Yeah, well, we certainly, one of the things we want to make sure is that we're at the very early stages in relationship to doing this. This is not mastered. I mean, the early indicators we've got are really exciting and thrilling. But we've got, if you look at potentially what could be brought to bear there's no real technical reason this can't be brought to bear, is the insight of our customers Actually, we're literally building stores right now with customers volunteering, female customers volunteering in a couple of communities to tell us the store we want, and then we're seeing if we can realize that store. But the inside of our customers, the inside of a whole series of suppliers, electronic suppliers as well as service suppliers, and then the inside of our folks. And if we can get those things linked up and we're clear about the problem we're trying to solve, we think we can add a lot of value.
You know, we saw that clip earlier where, you know, the kids built the employee toolkit thing.
Yeah.
And I understand that now, having seen that work, you're rolling out the ability to kind of almost eventually let any employee kind of express a store, build their own online store, in the sense of why have just one online store done in a mass way when each employee has their own set of contacts, their own view of the world, their own relationship, their own take on products.
Yeah, we had a young man come up and talk to me who was an intern, who works in one of our Iowa stores while he's going to college. And when he came up as an intern and started to do some work at the corporation, he said, you know, what people in Iowa City don't realize is who's working in the Iowa City store. Like, the photo department is made up of 2 professional photographers that are the best in town, and they have insight that is enormous. Now, not every department in the store is as good, but boy, if I in Iowa City knew that access was available, it would really be helpful. And with the web, it's possible to do that. So we're trying to figure out, and we've got some experiments starting, in terms of how do you make that localized skill set that may be utterly unique to that particular environment available and accessible to the communities we serve.
We'll wrap up today. I want to show you a clip of one of your employees in the call center doing something that, you know, 3 years ago, before any social networking, couldn't have been possible. And let's talk about what that means for customer intimacy. Let's take a look at Gina.
In this world of Web 2.0, when a customer has a service disappointment, they could potentially broadcast it globally. So, for example, with this customer, Mercury Info, they had a negative experience with Sears, and they Twittered about it. Sears wasn't able to help them out with their washer, and they referred to Sears as being lousy. Sears is not here engaging with them on Twitter, but we are. Through the Twitter reader that I utilize, I caught that they used the words Best Buy in a post, and I reached out to them and said, you know, here at Best Buy, we strive to provide excellent customer service. And then the customer said, thank you for your reply, Gina. I'll take that as a positive customer service gesture. Your stock just went up a few notches. And then they again said, go Best Buy. So this individual had began their experience with their washer with Sears, and, you know, now it looks like they are returning to us as a customer.
So when you first saw that, you as a merchant who kind of grew up in sales, you must have looked at it and thought, things are pretty different.
Oh, it's pretty thrilling for me because I started as I mentioned, I started as a clerk in a store 35 years ago. And when I it's an accident that I wound up in a leadership job. I just got lucky. But what I used when I had no real management experience as strategically was I just used the insight I gained out of a little 3-person store. So the fact that we can have this kind of dialogue coming from this many different angles with customers as a leading indicator in terms of what we can do in the future is for somebody with my lens, is pretty thrilling. Hard to even have imagined as a science fiction movie 20 years ago.
Thank you very much. What I found so amazing about this is I think it was only 4 years ago that social networking popped into our radar, and we remember the bloggers went to the convention and it was about that. And then 3 years ago it was about marketing, and then we heard about entertainment. And it looks like these experiments have started feeding back into actually how one does the art of management and growth.
Well,
growth strategy.
And the other thing I think we shouldn't miss is how much more fun it's going to be to work in an enterprise 5, 10, 15 years from now than it was when I started. And how much, and what are the productivity implications for the overall society if we can figure out how to master these skills, which they should be terrific.
A great note to end on. Thanks for coming today, Brad Anderson.
Appreciate it.
Thank all of you.